My brother raised.
Yeah, so I think I did it it was like a year ago, the photos got released, and I put the link on one of those pages. Say,
Did
hey,
ya?
you guys, you might see some people you know here.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Bone steel chair, he looks like a bad news bear.
Yeah, quite a lot of pictures though.
Yeah.
I've never seen pictures. Got released
That's a minute ago.
yet. 84? I think it was.
Yes. It was 16. Oh, nice to meet you, Keith. Yeah. Being born. Good to meet you.
At least you're
From
right.
From,
I was 4. I was
okay.
The only thing that separates me from the 25-year-old self is no. I haven't matured greatly.
You're willing to admit that?
Oh, it's,
What's
yeah, I'm
that?
kind of concerned about it at some point.
It's the old phrase, you grow older, but you don't grow up.
Yeah.
So if we only have 4 or 5 of them, there's 5 of us, do we wait for her to get here, or do we still open the meeting? It's up to Miss Ann.
I mean, the meeting starts.
That's supposed to be yours, too?
No.
No. Is that gonna be yours?
She had something else.
All right, it's 6:30. We are going to call to order the November 9th, 2023 City Planning Commission meeting. Kim, you got roll call?
Got it.
All right, and then,
I will move we approve the agenda.
there we go. Second. Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Oh, yeah, discussion. All right, all in favor? All opposed? All right, in the minutes, or you were here, agenda. And the minutes are in front of you from October 12th meeting. Any discussion on them? Do I hear a motion? I can make a motion.
Just double checking.
Oh, here's a hand.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So we're waiting on the minutes approval, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll move for approval of those minutes.
And
Second.
got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And motion passes. Or the minutes are. This is the section for public comments that is not on the agenda today. And if you choose to speak, just make sure you have signed in and you have open public comments. Seeing none, I will close public comments. And now we are on to our public hearing schedule. Jason, you can take this one.
So our applicant for the special land use is not here. I'm wondering if the planning commission will entertain moving at the end of the agenda. Maybe we can do the other items first, and if the applicant attends, we can address it with them then.
I don't have a problem with that.
So the only objection I would have to doing that is this is not for the applicant, this is for the public. And while there's only 2 people in the public, you might want to bifurcate at the very least.
Sure, we can do
All
the
of them
hearing.
now and then wait till the end to act upon.
Sure.
You may want to open the public hearing and allow the public to talk, and if nobody talks, then we deal with it at the end. But at least that way, we don't make these people wait 3 hours, if that's what they're here for.
I think that's a good idea.
So with that being said, well, I guess we will open up the public comments, public hearing on the request. Sorry, what did I do? Oh, no.
It's earlier.
Do we all need a gavel? Is that what this is going to be?
The request for Derek Zook for special land use in order of operating multi-family dwelling unit at 35 South Court Street located in, what was that? I-1 Industrial Zone District.
So are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on this?
Seeing none, I will close. And then we are gonna move this section to the end, right?
I'd make a motion that we move the discussion or any action to the end of the agenda.
Support.
We have a motion and support on the floor. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is moved. So we're putting that over to the business, right? Okay, and next on the agenda is site plan reviews. We do not have any. And then we are going to be now to other business. In section 1 is the request for Lapeer Villas Apartments on Rustic Drive on site plan amendment approval to remove fencing. Jason?
Okay, thank you. So the request in front of you this evening is from the Lapeer Villas Development, excuse me. They had a site plan originally approved back in 2019. They're working through development of that plan. In December of 2020, the zoning ordinance was amended to allow for an exception to landscaping under certain circumstances. And so as we were out doing final inspections with the applicant, they mentioned whether there's any flexibility on installing the required fence as part of the landscape buffer. And I did let them know that that amendment had been made. And so they asked to submit that request to the planning commission. And so that's what's in front of you this evening, is just to make a determination on that request to not construct the required fence within their landscape buffer. So this is the parcel. This dirt area here includes 4 buildings that have since been developed. We'll look at in a minute at their building, but in essence, they've broken the development up in phases. So everything to the north of Rustic Drive is phase 1. This area to the south is phase 2, and then there's a clubhouse and pool that are proposed, and those are phases 3 and 4 respectively. So just to give you kind of a sense, if we talk about phases of the development, those are the phases we're talking about. This is the location on the zoning map. The property is zoned RM1. The property immediately to the north is also zoned RM1. To the west and the south are zoned R2. And then to the east is an office zoning district and an office building, medical office building. So the applicant's request is to remove the 6-foot fence, cedar fence that's currently on their site plan along the property line, stating that the area of the property that borders the office district, they've created an appealing natural buffer of landscaping, and the rear property that's zoned R2 is currently used as agricultural, and so there's no visual impact. This is the revised site plan. They haven't actually revised anything on here. All they've done is they've highlighted the areas in red where that fence is mentioned, and essentially they would just remove those notes about fencing from the site plan is the proposed change. This illustrates the phases on the plan. I recognize it looks really busy on here, but again, this is phase 1. This is already built. If you drive through Lapeer Villas, this is essentially done. The only outstanding issue on that phase is this fence issue. Phase 2, if you drive through, is the one that's currently under construction. This building here has a temporary certificate of occupancy. Sorry, my pointer's dying. This building here is currently temporarily occupied. These 2 are currently under construction with the intent that they'll all be occupied by the end of this year, by the end of December. And so the request then, is to remove the fence from this border here. So this is the agricultural property. This border here, this is zoned residential. A portion of this property is wooded, the rest is a house. And then to remove the fence from this border here, which borders the office building. So I think we already covered the phases. Phase 3 and 4, the clubhouse and the pool are planned for next year. This is the relevant section of the ordinance that you need to make a determination on this evening. So the ordinance says the planning commission may determine landscaping requirements due to unique fixed features of the parcel would prevent development of required buffer zones. So you list landscaping requirements, and the planning commission may grant an exception from landscaping provisions of this article. So the key thing here is the question of, it's not just that you can grant an exception because you feel like it. It's you can grant an exception due to unique features of the parcel that would prevent development of the required buffer zones or other landscaping features. So the question really in front of you is, are there unique features of the parcel that essentially make putting that fence up not possible or not appropriate? The applicant didn't clearly identify unique features on the parcel in their application. So from a staff perspective, the entire parcel was cleared and graded before it was developed. So this is a Google Earth image from May of 2021. The entire site was graded and cleared. So as we think about, topography or other issues that might make putting a fence up difficult, I don't know that any of those would be relevant because the entire site was essentially graded and cleared. So, installing a fence, there shouldn't be any issues there with slope. So some of our findings related to this, the affected properties are all zone R2 or OS1, or adjacent to them. The R2 properties are classified as PUD in the future land use map, so they may be something other than just single family residential in the future. They have to go through the plan unit development process. The fence is there the fence is on the site plan because during the initial review, the applicant was required to install a type B buffer because you have a multifamily development adjacent to office and then adjacent to residential. So that type B buffer includes both landscaping as well as a fence. As we mentioned, exceptions to landscaping requirements are permitted due to unique features on the parcel, and the applicant hasn't indicated whether any unique features on the site exist that would make installation of the fence problematic. So as we mentioned, some of the unique features, the property's been cleared and graded, so likely not any issues with elevation. The residential property to the south here is wooded, and it's large and deep for a typical residential property in the city. So this is the portion of the property that's wooded. This is the house here in front. This is the property boundary to the east, adjacent to the office building. So there is a stand of large trees there. I'm not sure if those are on your property or theirs. I think they're on theirs. There is a large stand of trees there that do provide an additional buffer. There is a fair slope there, as you can see, that comes from the apartment buildings down to the office building. So those trees do a pretty good job of shielding the apartments that are there. So that is sort of a unique feature on the site. Most places don't have that stand of existing trees that have been there for 20 plus years that serve as separation. But our recommendation from staff's perspective is to deny this request, primarily just because of the way that the ordinance is worded. And that is that there have to be unique features on the site that prevent development of the required buffer zone. So if we think about the gas station we had come in 3 months ago that was required to do a buffer zone, there physically wasn't the space on the site to put that buffer where it needed to go. There were multiple driveways, curbs, it could not physically fit there, and so there was an alternative that we took to address that issue. There was a physical issue on the site that literally made it impossible to do it. In this case, unless there's some other information that we don't have currently as staff, we don't see anything that makes location of the fence not possible. It's more just the applicant feels like it's not relevant because of the surrounding land uses and character of the area. Any questions for me?
Mr. Ball, forgive me if I get the directions wrong, but to the south where that single family residence, the rear property is.
Yeah.
Just from the aerial overhead, it looks like there is some deep wooding, deep woods. That appears all to be on the residential property, not on the multi-development property.
That's correct.
So, just in my opinion, it seems like it would be difficult for the developer to claim that that is the barrier being provided because it's not on their property.
Correct. And I'm not clear because they're not shown on the site plan. I think these trees are the same. I believe they're on the property there to the east. They're not shown on the site plan, so my assumption is that they must be on the neighboring property.
Not a terribly unique looking piece of front or rear yard there. Bunch of grass.
And I think that's the challenge for the planning commission, right? Is we always have folks that would like to amend landscaping standards. And we adopted this new ordinance provision in December to provide some flexibility and keep things out of going to the zoning board of appeals. In those situations where the landscaping just isn't feasible. But in this case, it doesn't seem to be an issue unless there's more information the applicant can provide that it's an issue of feasibility. It's more just an issue of the applicant feeling like it's not necessary.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions for Jason?
Thank you.
I guess my ultimate feeling on this is if they would have presented us a unique feature to prevent this, that would have been presenting that to us. Is the applicant in the room?
Representative one.
Would you like to get up and discuss, what you're presenting to us?
What's your
Pretty
name?
much Austin. James Township. Jason had pretty much everything right spot on. Our phase 2 does have a lot of landscaping between that wooded area, oak trees, pines. And then the architectural field from our driveway, that's about let's say 8-foot slope. So I think the fence up top of there would be the hardest part of the unique feature. The office side, that's flat ground and that's their trees, so I don't have much to argue on that one. That's all I got with that.
When you say significant landscaping, behind my house, there's real thick woods, it's about 20, 30 foot deep, and I can't see anything on the other side of that. Normally in landscaping, it's kind of pretty, and you place a tree here and place a tree 20 feet away. It's not gonna block your vision, so what do you mean by that?
There's oaks that are, I would say, 10 to 15 feet apart, so, and then pines, about the same.
Now, are these pre-existing trees that are old growth, or is this gonna be saplings that can be placed in the ground?
These are all new implants.
Good. You guys have questions for the developer? Sorry, I'm stealing your thunder.
Oh, good. Thank you, Austin.
It's my feeling that there's nothing unique here that prevents them from putting a 6-foot cedar fence up on the property. And that's what our standard is, that's what we've just passed within the zoning requirement that they have to meet that standard, and I don't see how they meet it.
I agree with you, except that I would state that this, it almost feels like simply a naked attempt to get out of paying for a fence. But I don't want to assume that is the intention. I'd be willing to table this to provide, because there wasn't much provided to us. If the standard, which is pretty clear,
Isn't that in the, when they make the request, don't they see that the standard?
they should, of course, but they didn't. And again, I don't want to make assumptions that this is just a naked attempt to not spend the money that they've already promised to spend. I'd be willing to table this to provide them an opportunity to come in and provide the information that is probably appropriate, but we just didn't get that. I find, forgive me, just one more thing. I just find it hard to grant an exception for the same reasons that you're stating, that I see nothing unique here. But I'd also like to present them the opportunity to present that to us if maybe they misunderstood the standards. I know Jason's great at his job and explain the standards to them, but it's possible.
Did they give you any, did they indicate to you, they understood that there had to be something unique about the parcel?
Yeah, we tried to pretty clearly communicate that was the key character, the key item, right? As often happens with this, there are deadlines, and so, they kind of hustled in and got an application submitted with a kind of minimal amount of detail. So I don't think it ever hurts to give them more opportunity to present that. It sounds like maybe there are portions of the site where it might make more sense than others. But I also, we think fairly clearly communicated the key was that they have to demonstrate there's something unique about the site that requires the fence to come off, and in their application, that was not what was stated.
I mean, if this was more of a complicated issue, I would understand that, okay, maybe they didn't really understand what they really needed to present. Maybe they needed to, because we've done that before in other situations where we haven't come back, but I don't know, I think this was pretty straightforward.
So one thing that I would say that Austin mentioned is that there's, would you say, an 8-foot slope? We're talking about a 6-foot fence. So if you're at ground level and you're a 5-foot, 6-foot tall person, there's an 8-foot slope down, and at the bottom, 6-foot fence. You're not blocking vision, which I think is part of the standard, right? We don't want to have people staring in an office building or whatever. So I could see that as a unique feature, but apart from Austin coming here and telling us that, it's not a lot of evidence that was submitted. And that would only be part of the site that we're asking for.
You said that's on the be the southern border, Austin, is that right?
You start at the south and work up that west line there,
Okay.
about halfway of that line.
Commissioner Shea, did you have a comment?
I live there, so it's hard for me to be voting, but when I first moved in, they talked to me in the office and asked me when they found out I was on the commission, what the purpose was, and I didn't know. But I know in talking with them, they were thinking of the aesthetics. And that when you look from Baldwin, the way they've landscaped it, they've tried to make it look nice. And that fence would interfere with that nice, clean view. And so, and I know when I drove in today or yesterday, I noticed there where the new ones, and I think it's what you're talking about as far as the pines and the oak trees. As you enter on that south drive of the land that they've had to clear to go up to there, they have planted, looks like they're 6 feet apart maybe, oak and pine trees, so to create a nice landscape up. So I think their thought was, and maybe they need an opportunity to make that clearer, is that he was really thinking of the aesthetics, because he's very proud of how, at least that's the way it came across when I was first there.
Well, I guess I'll just add a point to clarify this, because now we've added some flexibility on the ordinance, because we have to be a little careful about how we exercise that flexibility, right? And so what the ordinance says is that if there's some unique feature that prevents the landscaping from being established, the planning commission can grant a waiver. Not that there's a unique feature that aesthetically it'll be better if the fence is there, because then we end up in a funny place on these things in the future, where, you know, in some cases we require a fence, in other places we don't. If the issue there is that type B buffer maybe doesn't always need a fence, the solution there is to amend the ordinance again. The way that waiver is worded is not such that the planning commission has sort of broad interpretation to waive the requirements. It's pretty specific, and that is that there's a feature that prevents it from being established, not just that the planning commission determines that it's unnecessary, or in this case, it's inappropriate. There's something that you can't do it, right? It's a square peg round hole problem. And so that's kind of the key thing. So if there is a slope, that means like literally I can't put a fence in, or it's going to be really difficult to get a fence, and that's a different consideration than just saying that, you know, the area is not currently developed.
What is the purpose of a fence? I mean, is there, I don't know when that became part of this.
Privacy is the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intent of that type. We have 3 types of buffers. There's an A, and a B, and a C, right? And so they go in that order in terms of intensity. So A is the most significant buffer. It's the widest, has the most landscaping and fence. B is sort of in the middle, and C is the least. And so that B buffer has sort of a minimum amount or a medium amount of landscaping compared to A and B, but it still requires a fence. So it's required where you have 2 uses that aren't necessarily compatible. So it's required between, you know, multifamily and single family, or multifamily and commercial. Whereas if you had a residential next to a commercial, you have to do the type A buffer, which is bigger with more physical space in the buffer in terms of the setback.
So could I follow up on something that you said, though? It sounded like you indicated that the developer learned that you lived within their development, and then approached you and attempted to convince you outside of the public meetings.
No,
Okay. Because my understanding of Open Meetings Act is that they can't have ex parte communications with any of the board members about anything that's in front of the board.
no, I was asked what the process was to question it, and that was all, when I found out I was on the commission. And I told them they would have to get in touch with.
I have a question, I think, for Jason. So, different development, but the apartments at Wright that are immediately north of that, I think it's Turtle Estates, is that right?
Correct.
Is there a fence bordering that property?
There's not one between the 2, because they're both multifamily, so there's no required buffer between the 2.
Okay, but anywhere else on that Turtle Estate, is there fences?
I can't speak to that for sure. I haven't been on that property recently.
Pretty certain there isn't. There is a landscape. There's actually a tree with like a hill that blocks it from Myers that goes over. So
Yeah, because the way I'm thinking about this, like, depends on how you feel about fence. Fences make good neighbors, that type of thing. But the folks to the south, because it's single family residence down there, and I do believe that someone within that proximity showed up when we were talking about a development on 24 that was backing up to Baldwin Road with the headlights.
Oh, I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
Remember how that went?
Yeah.
And the developer wasn't real keen on listening. I think what I'm thinking about is that those particular people in that area, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Some people don't like fences, some people do. If you've got an 8-foot buffer with a bunch of trees, maybe they prefer that over a fence. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to put myself, as far as the medical facility, that's downhill. I don't know if you have to build a 30-foot tall fence for privacy from that. And I think that's what you were getting at, right? So to me, I don't know, I struggle with, I think like what Mike said, probably maybe giving them an opportunity with a little more detail and facts as to why would make more sense for me. Because I understand we have policies and things we want to follow, but I don't feel like I understand it enough, you know what I mean? Like putting up a fence, some people may love that, some people may not love that. And that's my story.
Well, we'll say the other option there is it doesn't have to be a fence, it can also be a 4-foot berm.
So that was gonna be my follow-up is, okay, so, and forgive me, there's A, B, and C buffer zones.
Yeah.
It sounds like B is the proposed or the required, which
Correct.
requires a fence or a berm. It doesn't sound like the developer is proposing to do any kind of buffer, it's just get rid of fence.
So they've planted the required landscaping. So the
Okay.
landscape, in phase 1 that's done, they've planted the required landscaping. They meet our requirements with landscaping in that buffer zone, but they have not done the fence or the berm. I'm assuming the berm isn't a great option now since they've already graded the site, but they have not established the fence or the berm.
So this is along the lot line that's running north and south, correct?
It's all along 3 lot lines. So it'd be the 2 lot lines running north and south on the east and the west of the property, and the lot line running east and west on the south side of the property.
The most contentious one would be between the office building, the medical building, correct? And is that, and there's,
I mean,
to me on Google, it's really not showing a lot there.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a little, again, I guess I would caution you about getting caught up in which one of those is the fence having less impact, because that's not what you're asked to do as a planning commission. If you were, we'd have a lot of really difficult conversations about landscaping. The question is, is there some unique feature that prevents it from being established? So it literally can't. I just point you back to the Greenbelt discussion we had with the Sunoco station back in July, right? Required to have a Greenbelt on the right of way. There's literally no clear ground to install that Greenbelt. And so we allowed them to put it on another portion of the site that wasn't on the right of way, but they still, were complying with the vegetation standards. Because physically it couldn't go there unless we made it literally rip up the parking lot and all the curb that's been there for a lot of years. And that to me is the standard to think about as a planning commission. I would encourage you to think about, because otherwise we go down a rabbit hole with every landscaping request.
So that's my issue, is like, okay, so let's say we table this, I mean, what are they really gonna be able, I just don't see them looking at that map, the topography of that property, that there's anything that's gonna prevent them. There's nothing unique about that property that's preventing them from putting that fence up. There's nothing. So if we're gonna follow our standard that we just got enacted in December, no, this is just 22, like last year.
Yeah.
I think we should be following what the ordinance says, and so
Well, I 100% agree with what you just said. I'm just stuck on the possibility, the minor possibility that we should provide them the opportunity to provide us with their argument about uniqueness, which they have not done in this submission.
Well, I guess actually from a process perspective, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this, you mentioned before, Mike, we're requesting from you a site plan amendment. So you can deny that site plan amendment request, and they can submit another amendment request. I don't think there's anything preventing them from bringing the same amendment request back or a different one, maybe for a smaller portion with better information.
So, and they could actually, if we deny this because we don't have anything in front of us, they could actually file another motion. They could file another amendment.
Yeah,
Application
in this case, it's not like a special land use where they can't come back for a year. This is a site plan amendment request, and so we can amend the site plans.
But it could be for the same exact request.
Correct. There's nothing preventing additional site plan amendment requests.
Is there a cost involved to doing that?
There is.
How much is it?
This request was $1,000.
Oh, that's a little pricey.
Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, on one hand, the cost is what prevents them from asking for everything under the sun every week. But it's,
true.
I'll tell you what, if I spent $1,000, I would have put in a heck of a lot more effort than I got here.
But that's the point, then why, so, no disrespect to this gentleman that's here, why isn't he here? Why isn't he here to explain what he thinks is so unique about his property? So I mean, I'm gonna, maybe it'll go down, but I'm gonna make a motion to deny the site plan amendment requested by Lapeer Villas to grant an exception to the landscaping requirement and not require a fence along the east, south, and west borders of the property because unique features of the parcel do not prevent development of the required buffer zone.
I want to assume the best, but I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing.
Can I vote? I don't know if I should abstain.
You've made it known that you had a conversation and you made it above board. So if you think that you can vote without being unduly influenced, I think it's
She's
just.
saying because she's a resident at Lapeer Villas, that's why she's there.
So,
Sure, I get that.
Yeah.
It's your call about whether you think you can be a neutral voter or not.
Okay. I guess there's a motion, no more discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And
I'm
did
gonna
you,
abstain.
did you abstain? And Ann did this.
Okay, so everybody voted yes, except for Ann is a abstain. Okay, so motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay. On to the next other, in front of us is the request from Blaine's Farm and Fleet to determination considering exterior building materials for the new construction project on the southeast corner of South Lapeer Road and Turtle Road. Jason, take it away.
Thank you. Blaine's Farm and Fleet, you all reviewed this site plan at the very beginning of this year. Prior to you all getting the site plan, they received several variances from the zoning board of appeals. For a variety of issues, signage, some issues related to the layout of the parking area, I believe, and one of those was also for building materials. So at that time, they received a variance from the zoning board of appeals to allow them to install non-decorative tilt-up concrete panels. So the ordinance requires those concrete panels to be decorative, which essentially means you put like a faux brick or a faux block, a facade on a concrete panel that looks like brick. So in this case, the zoning board of appeals allowed them not to have to put that facade on and just to put up a painted concrete panel. So they then came back to us to request another variance to the ZBA last month to provide, to instead do a metal wall paneling system that mimics the look of stucco. So that request came in front of the ZBA. When that request came in front of the ZBA, and we've had sort of a change in planners and administration. One of the things we communicated at the ZBA at that time was that the planning or the zoning ordinance very strictly gives this responsibility in determining building material appropriateness to the planning commission. And in this case, this building material they're proposing, I don't think you all have made a determination on. And so we gave the ZBA the option to take action on the variance or defer to you all to make a determination of whether or not this building material met the standard. And then the applicant, if they want to, can appeal your decision to the ZBA, but it's not a variance. It would be an appeal saying the planning commission got this wrong.
Mr. Block, can I jump in
Yes.
for 1 second, sorry. So, sounds like, and I wasn't here at the time, sounds like previously they asked the ZBA for some kind of variance to do these tilt-up panels. You know, it's pretty clear to me under the ordinances that the planning commission, not the ZBA, has the authority to determine whether an exterior material is appropriate under the ordinances. So from a kind of a stare decisis type decision-making to the future, if the ZBA inappropriately made that decision based on the ordinances, would we be bound in the future, the city, to allow tilt-up concrete panels?
No, ZBA decisions don't typically create precedent. So they're supposed to each be specific to a property or an issue, because that's the nature of the variance, is it's related to the property. So there's no intent that, at least as I understand it, not an attorney, but as I've understood it, ZBA decisions do not create precedent. Planning commission decisions do, because you're interpreting the ordinance, but a ZBA decision is relative to that property and unique circumstances on that property. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so if we were to make that determination, it would be determinative to the future, but
That is correct. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So as I mentioned, in this case, the variance granted was to allow for painted precast panels from the zoning board of appeals. In this case, the applicant is also proposing some modifications to the store footprint. It's getting slightly smaller. When you all saw the original site plan back in February, I believe it was about 109,000 square feet. They're looking at a smaller store footprint. And as a consequence, the parking lot's going to shrink a little bit. Those are amendments that we can process administratively because the store's not expanding, it's shrinking, as long as site layout and overall circulation doesn't change. And so we're sort of waiting on processing that amendment. They're also working with the Lapeer County Road Commission to finalize driveway permits. We're waiting on processing that overall amendment until we make this final determination on building materials. And so the applicant provided several renderings. I didn't put them all in the presentation. They're all in your packet of sort of what the material, their overall store would look like. The proposed panel is sort of the light tan color here on the building in these renderings you can see, not the sort of brown red color. This is an example again of that rendering. I know you can't read the text, but the text is pointing out the different building materials on the front facade of the building. And so again, the darker brown red is synthetic stucco. The light color tan would be the metal paneling, and there's also the portion at the entrance that's labeled Blaine's Farm and Fleet as a metal panel without any texture. And so, as you all are familiar, the ordinance requires that the predominant building material to be permanent and typical of Michigan. And so, in this case, based on the information they provided for the ZBA, we calculated the predominance here. And so, about 85% of the total building material will be made up of this texture-clad metal wall paneling, as they're proposing, or some other metal wall panel. This is the example. This comes right out of your packet. You also have this in your packet showing what that metal wall panel looks like. And the example there at the bottom, these are a couple of the renderings they provided as examples of that metal wall paneling in application. I just point out to you that the one at the top probably would meet our standard.
Would or would not?
Would.
Would.
Because the metal wall paneling is not the predominant material of it, right? You've got split face block over about 50% of the building face, and then you've got windows and other things there. And so in that case, again, the metal wall paneling, it's not that we don't allow metal wall paneling, we just don't allow it to be the predominant material on the building. Again, some other examples that were also included in your packet of that application of that building material. So from our findings, again, proposal is, the vast majority of the exterior of the building, 85% or so, would be metal paneling. The variance in January 23 allowed for the change, not necessarily of material, but type of material, right? So we're still talking about precast metal wall panels. The variance in that case was for non-decorative versus decorative, but it's a material that still is permitted under that section of the zoning ordinance. And that was one of the things the ZBA noted in their review about why they felt like it should really come back to the planning commission, because in that case it was, whether right or wrong, still the tilt-up panels, it was just a non-decorative version versus a decorative version that they granted the variance for before. As you all remember, we did approve stucco as an approved building material. We're very specific about that in talking about the traditional application of stucco, meaning stucco adhered to a concrete block or brick surface, not our sort of synthetic stuccos as we've talked about. And then just to note too that the additional section of the zoning ordinance clearly identifies prefabricated steel panels and other metal siding as material that cannot be a predominant building material. And this is that section, as you all are familiar with, just to highlight again that prefabricated steel or metal panels, so that it's identified as having to be an accent. So our recommendation from the staff's perspective is that the planning commission determine that the texture-clad metal wall panels do not qualify as a quality building material characteristic of Michigan because they're identified specifically in that following section as a material that should be an accent. In this case, it's not dissimilar from the interpretation we just talked through with the fence. This is a building materials ordinance. It's not a building appearance ordinance. So we're regulating materials, not necessarily look. We have elements that talk about earth tone colors, as we're familiar with, but it's an ordinance for material. And so the key definition as a planning commission, when we reviewed stucco, we talked about stucco as a material, not things that look like stucco. And so again, just to avoid going down rabbit holes as we evaluate different building materials, and building materials evolve all the time, is that, as a planning commission, the determination here really is that metal wall paneling an appropriate material based on the ordinance? And so from staff's perspective, our recommendation is that it's not, primarily because steel and metal wall paneling is specifically listed in the next section of the ordinance as being only appropriate for that. Any questions for me?
Okay, with what you just said about the steel panel, what type of steel panel? I mean, this is a stucco look.
I believe.
Or are you talking about plain steel, like a pole barn steel?
So I think they brought a sample they can pass around for you.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's not just a steel panel, it's decorative.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what is this ordinance that is saying that it's a steel panel? Is this like a pole barn steel, ribbed? Is that what it is? I mean, now we got to scrutinize a little better here. I mean,
Yeah, so and that is an issue, right? Is we say metal and steel panel, period.
what steel panel?
So I mean, in the past, we've evaluated anything that's metal or steel as being not able to be a predominant building material. And so in this case, if we're saying, finished decorative steel paneling that has these certain characteristics could be a predominant building material, that's an interpretation you can make. We just have to be very clear about what that is.
Building materials are changing all the time, improving, and, I think we got to bend with the times a little bit.
And I don't disagree with you on that at all. What I would say is the better solution to that, and I hate to say this again, is to amend the ordinance. Because if we interpret metal panel, it's going to be hard for us to differentiate between a pole barn metal panel. But again, that's up to you all. The applicant talk about what they're doing, and in this case, maybe it's something you feel like really clearly is different and it is appropriate. That's your determination to make as a plan.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions for Jason? The applicant is here, I assume.
Yes.
Hello,
everybody.
Now.
Dave Lynn, I'm senior architect for Blake's Farm and Fleet. You're asking about what a sample of the panel. This is a sample of the texture clad panel. In the submittal, we've actually got two types of panel. This is the one we originally brought, which is a single bent metal panel that would go on a structural system. The other sample is the second list that's in your packet is a sandwich type panel, so it'd be like a 2-inch insulated thick panel, and it's a wider type panel, but it has the same finish, the same metal finish, but it would be totally encapsulated insulation. This is the EVIS that would be proposed, that is proposed and approved on the building. So the finish, this is just indicated what the finish of the EVIS would be, and then this is the finish that would be on the actual panel for the material that they're requesting. So what we've done is, on our prototype, when we initially came in back when we first presented our initial prototype would be a precast facade, and then we used a standard metal building type panel for the three sides around it. We revised that to request, because we thought there was no metal panel approved as a material for the city of Lapeer, so we redesigned our prototype to be the precast panel all the way around, which we've done on one store previously. That's not typically our prototype. Our prototypes are always evolving. We try and have a set prototype. We're always, deciding what we're doing and then modifying them. This will be the new prototype material that we'll use on all our stores. to replace the precast. And what it does is it gives us the same look as the precast. It gives us a textured panel versus a painted precast, which is what we typically use on it. A flat precast panel that is site painted. It is durable from impact resistance. It does have a maintenance factor. We have not had to repaint them yet, but that eventually will come because the paint, like any paint, it will eventually fade. What we like about these panels is that, especially with the insulated one, which is the one that we are more than likely going to go with, and that will be the one we'll go with. Gives us a wider panel, gives us a thicker panel, and it actually gives us a 2-inch insulating panel. So it's similar to like a garage door section construction, but it would be installed vertically every 42 inches. There'd be a gap, or not a gap, there'd be a seam or a butt joint where they butt together. It's just that versus the sample that you have there. The structure is different and how we insulate it is different, but it's the same gauge metal panel that's on the panel. Except for the one with the sandwich panel is, I believe it's a more durable panel just because it's got more rigidity to it, as opposed that's just a flat panel, which still is acceptable. Either one is going to be on our prototype. But right now, it'll more than likely we'll design it with the, if approved, we'll design it with the wider panel and the sandwich panel. As far as durability goes, yes, with concrete is a more durable material as far as impact and just the fact that it's concrete. But this is a durable material, every bit as much, unless a car runs into it. The way we've designed it is that for our building, we've got a 3-foot tall or 4-foot tall split face block base around the entire front of the building, where shopping carts and, well, even a car would impact that first. So we protect this panel. Same that we would do with EIFS. EIFS, if you're the stucco, the synthetic stucco there, is a rigid insulation that has that finish on the top of it, and that can get much more easily damaged than this panel ever will. Again, we really like this because it's got the pre-finished factory finish on it. We shouldn't ever have to paint it. I mean, we could paint it in the future, 50 years, 30 years down the road. If it's faded, we can come back and paint that panel, but we wouldn't have to. It gives us a consistent, clean finish from the get-go. And like I say, we think it's going to be a real beautiful panel, and it's going to be on every one of our stores from here on.
Any questions?
I have a question. I don't know if Jason can actually go back to the pictures, but like you had, not that one, right there. You had actually said, Jason, that the top one actually, based upon the type of materials on there, that actually the metal part of it would not be predominant. And so that actually that would not be something they would need to come here and get approval for. Is that what you said?
Correct. That's a pretty standard application where we're looking at, a building facade that is.
Is this something you got, or this is one of their?
This is one of the.
That's an example.
It was an example. The prefabricated panel is the portion that's the top part of that building.
Right,
And the bottom part's the split face block. And this is sort of the intent of the ordinance, right? Is to have it not be predominant.
Right, so it'd be less than 50%.
It would be close. I mean, that would be approximately 50% would be close.
So if you're looking at those photographs or in your submittal packets, we have the cut sheet information on the specific specifications for each type of those panels. The first one is the textured clad, which is that panel right there. The second set is the tough wall, which is the sandwich panel insulated pre-finished panel. This is showing, these aren't renderings, these are real built projects, things that we pull up, indicating what that product would look like on a store in real life, not just a rendering that, if you go back to our renderings, what our building looks like. I mean, that's what the actual material will look like. So wherever the tan is on there, it'll have that consistent, that look. It'll be raised up, the lighter color, that's the precast, not the precast, that's the split face base. To protect us from damage, carts, like I say, carts, people hitting it, pretty much anything. And then these panels would be installed vertically where the tan is. The reddish brown would be the EIFS, which is that material there, and it'll all blend together. I think we've got a pretty cohesive design for the store, and this is, like I say, this is our new prototype that will be built in other communities and on. We won't be proposing the precast. If you go to the last one, if you go backwards, Jason, to,
This one?
no, keep going, back to the photographs. So this is the texture wall, these panels are the tough wall, and that's just showing, indicating what that panel would look like. I mean, those are nice buildings, these are high-level buildings, and it's a good building material. I've seen it. It's been used in other big box retailers as a substitute for precast, and it's mainly for that reason. It gives us some insulating potential, and it gives us a nice clean look of what our brand essentially stands for. And that's essentially what our new prototype's going to be.
You sort of answered it, but I just want to ask it anyways. The one that you would like to use that's got the 3-inch insulation.
The 2-inch
I think you said
insulation,
to
yeah,
The solid panels probably is more of an energy saving
yes.
than any of the others because the building that would need, the picture that she asked to see, that wouldn't have the ability to have that all the way through the 3-inch or.
What you have to do is you have to treat it differently. I mean, the buildings have to reach ComCheck, which is basically says it has to have a certain R value. So if that panel, which is uninsulated, we would have a different structural system behind it that would carry a lot more bad insulation, carry it. With the sandwich panel, again, it gives it more durability. It's a stiffer panel. It's a wider panel because we like the seams to limit those a bit. On our typical precast, you'd probably be 10 feet between panels. It usually goes off of the bed size of a semi when they're hauled, and it varies from supplier. So a 42-inch, you'll see them when you stand up close, but from a distance, it'll look just like those renderings that we have up there. And again, if you look at the photographs like that, wherever you see those panels, it'd be probably the light between the windows and the darker gray on the top picture. Those are the same panels. They're continuous. I think you can get them up to 45 feet. Our building's 25, right? So we would probably do a 25-foot panel. Tilts up, no seams. You have where the butt joints is. It looks like a stucco finish on precast. And like I say, our precast, as it's designed now, is your typical precast wall panel that's it's fabricated by a precaster. They bring it, they tilt it up, and that's part of your structural system. This gives us the same look. I believe it's just as durable. Again, I mean, if we hit it with an airplane or something like that, it might last better with precast, but we think it's a durable product. It's a good product. It's one that we're happy with, and again, it's one that we're going to use on all our prototypes now. It's basically becoming a prototype standard.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay.
Comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sarah Iverson Smith, also from Blaine's, Janesville. We've been here a year and a half working on this project, and I know Dale, the former mayor, kind of let the cat out of the bag when we weren't quite ready for it. But we've been trying really hard to make this project work. We like Lapeer. This is our top site in the state that we want to be at. We appreciate you guys meeting with us again, even almost a year later. But I believe that we're in line with the spirit of the ordinance with the changing of the stucco look, even though not to the letter of it. We believe that this is what's going to make this project work for us. Unfortunately, the reason why it's taken us so long to see dirt move or things happening out there is it's just become crazy expensive, and we're trying to shrink the building, change a few things. We moved it back 50 feet to avoid some more fill and wetlands, and we've done everything we can to reduce costs and make it still a great store, still a great site, but still make it more worth building for us to eventually make a profit off of. So we ask that you consider the spirit of the ordinance. We ask that you look at the drawing of the building. Can you go back to the one where it shows the long look? We have a lot of different reliefs on the building, different materials, different colors. We think it's an attractive building, and we think that'll look great on the site that it's in. So yeah, we just ask that you consider the reason why the changes are made and that we're still trying to make this project work. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment?
Good evening. My name is Richard Atto. I'm a local general contractor. I work with the property owner. And I just wanted to make a few comments about the panel. I actually use insulated metal panels all the time because the rigidity of the panels, the fact that they're pre-finished and they're finished in the factory. So there's a warranty that's even far greater than taking the unfinished precast panel. If we were to say, for example, I know it was approved smooth, but whether I paint it or whether I spray a textured finish on it, it'll have to be redone sooner than if the warranty on the metal panel expired. And the fact that it has an R value, that's not easy to obtain because, excuse me, even the same thickness of insulation, if it's a Bassett fiberglass or so on a bad or blown in, doesn't equal the value of 3 inches of the urethane that the panel comes with in the factory. Plus it has a finish on the inside that can either be left alone, it can be a color, or it can be painted. And basically, if you took a precast panel and sprayed it with a light stucco finish, it would actually look the same. The only difference is, as our architect mentioned, is that in the metal panel there'd be a seam, but it's a much finer seam, probably 42 inches. With the precast, it might be 8 to 10 feet, but the joints are much bigger, and they're actually more visible than the smaller ones because the panels are actually tongue and groove when they fit together. So the negative of that panel is that being exposed to cars or vehicles or whatever, so the fact that we don't propose masonry at the bottom, that takes away that issue with sometimes kids like to do things that they're not supposed to do, but on masonry it's easier to maintain. And lastly, if we had to, you are able to cut out a panel and replace it if something would happen, because it's a tongue and groove product, but the way it's fastened, you can actually remove a panel and replace one down the road if we have to. So I know that I actually sit on the planning commission of a local community, and I hear both sides, so I'm on both sides of the table. Sometimes because things are changing so fast, not only in materials, but even uses, and we're getting requests for uses that are not even in the ordinance because such a use never existed before. So with the panel, even though it's metal and we're saying we don't want metal, it's no different visually than spraying a textured finish on a precast concrete panel. And in our case, what was approved was even smooth and it would have to be painted. That requires more maintenance than these new technology panels and the way they do them in the factory, and they bake on the finish and they guarantee them. So I just wanted you to hear my opinion of the product, because even though it is metal and it says what it says, it doesn't look like a metal. It looks like a textured concrete product, but it should be far greater insulation. It's lighter, it's more sustainable, and it's, I think the outcome, in my opinion, is that it's a nicer looking product, and I'm sure you're going to see more and more of them, because in the old days, metal panel meant vertical lines, some oil canning, which you don't get when it's an insulated panel because it's actually adhered to the metal. The oil cannings, when you look at a panel, you see all this wavy, you don't see that. I'm actually quite proud of the building that we just installed. These panels are 32 foot tall, and the wall just looks perfectly flat and clean, and it doesn't have the same type of texture that we're proposing here, but it's got a little like a orange peel texture, and the owner just loves it. He's far nicer than doing a masonry wall because it's finished on the inside, finished on the outside, and it's insulated. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
What was your last name?
ATTO.
Another comment?
Yeah, one more comment. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Ager. I'm the owner of the property. I stood here before and with the ZBA meetings as well. So, I just wanted to reiterate some of the comments, but Commissioner Johnson here is probably the statements that I want to echo the most, because what he said was just, resounding to me, that building materials are changing all the time. You write an ordinance, it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So I think part of the discussion here, or the contemplation, is how are we interpreting the ordinance? Again, is it a decorative panel, or is it a, metal wall panel? And in this case, we're actually upgrading because this is a decorative panel. If we like stucco, we like the look of that. I mean, this looks better, it performs better, more efficiencies, more insulation. So at the end of the day, I think our decision just has to come down to, do we think that Blaine's is putting a good quality building here? And, they're building a beautiful building here. This is not something that is a cheap product. So at the end of the day, I think common sense should prevail. And, we should look at this as, is this an acceptable development? Is this an acceptable, and I don't think this is setting any kind of precedent unless somebody's gonna come up here and use the same type of paneling, this exact paneling. And then, in that case, you'd say, yeah, we like the paneling, we like the quality, we like the R value, we like the performance. So I think what maybe the ordinance is hinting towards is that we don't want to see a pole barn. And if you think that this building that they're going to put up here is going to be a giant pole barn, then I wouldn't vote for it either. But I guarantee you that they're not going to be investing this much money in this building, in this site, in this community, and want to be here for 50 or 100 years and put up a pole barn. That's not what this building is. So I think that's the major differentiation. This is a different type of building material. Again, it's evolving, so I think we need to just consider that. Thank you.
Any more discussion? I guess my whole thing, Jason, this would be for you. This is specifically about it being metal, obviously. So, in a gap where we would modify our ordinance to allow that? Is that what you stated? You started out like that in our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as a planning commission, you all can make a determination on this. The point of our staff recommendation is that the ordinance really clearly says metal panels have to be accent, can't be predominant. And so from that perspective, for staff, it's hard to look at a way to interpret beyond that because this is a metal panel. I don't disagree with anything the applicants have said. The struggle with this is very significant. Building materials are changing extremely fast right now because prices are through the roof. And so people are coming up with alternative ways to achieve the same result. Our struggle there is ordinances can't change often as quickly as building materials can. And so that's kind of where, as a planning commission, you're stuck at the crux of that. I'm making that determination on, is this building material similar enough to those materials that are permitted in the ordinance that it's appropriate or not?
So that's exactly my point too. I don't think anybody's disagreeing about what the look, appearance, and all that stuff. The 100% evolution of materials is that is happening overnight. That's 100% in agreement with that. Or my thing is, how do we approach this?
Well, and again, we've all looked at the panel and we all appreciate that materials are changing every day. This is not my first rodeo. I've dealt with requests for, all sorts of different types of materials. But it's all already been taken care of. In the ordinance, it says prefabricated steel panels or other similar metal siding should be only used as accents and not dominate the building exterior of the structure. It's an interesting concept. It's a new building material. It looks like a decent building material, but it's a metal panel. If this building was being proposed, and Jason, I forget the numbers, it was like 62% or something, this material. From my, understanding the English language, 62% is dominating the exterior. It's not an accent material. If this, and again, we're cognizant of the price. I don't think anybody in the room doesn't understand that stuff is expensive, but the ordinance is pretty clear. It shall not dominate the exterior of the structure. If this body wants to change what we allow and allow for cheaper construction, let's do it through the ordinance process. If these people want to invest in our community, they should meet the standards.
Okay.
Let's see here. First of all, I'm gonna just go ahead and say I'm not a building materials expert. So, the ordinance is what it is, you know, that it cannot be predominant. I think that's where, Marty and I are kind of in lockstep with this one here. Stucco is acceptable if it was predominant, is that correct?
Correct. As we define it as a traditional application of stucco, because stucco is concrete, right? And so we looked at that as being a material that was durable, you know, reasonably often used in Michigan, and so we approved that as a predominant building material for a project back in July, and so that holds for everything else going forward.
I guess what I'm getting at is that it's to me, there's a lot of semantics going on here because, you know, I view stucco as absolutely terrible. I can give you many examples of damage to it. You can see the mesh, but it goes back to the ordinance, what the ordinance says. So to me, this is more of an ordinance request than anything, because personally, everything that they said to me is very compelling, and I completely think this will be a beautiful building presented exactly like that. But we're stuck in that we've got to follow some guidelines. And, you know, if we just make a decision just to circumvent them every time, we're going to be creating a problem down the road, right? So my question for everyone is, what needs to happen for that ordinance to change?
So you could initiate a text amendment tonight to change the ordinance. We could draft it for next month, and it would be at city commission around the first.
And what would you want it to say? That
Well,
metal panels are now okay?
I'm spitballing. No, I'm trying to think outside the box here, because I think part of the trick of what we do here, part of the tough part is that if we're so ironclad with every decision that we make because it was written before, we might chase away good opportunity for the city. That's my concern. So what makes sense for both sides? That's my concern.
But we also shouldn't be into this race to the bottom. That some business comes in and they say, we want to put up a cardboard building because it's cheap, but you'll get our business.
That's not what I'm getting at. I mean, again, I stated that I'm not a building material expert.
Sure, and I'm just obviously making a crazy idea here, but there shouldn't be a race to the bottom. We have good standards, we expect good buildings to come into our community. Now, 62% down to 49%, I don't see why that's not doable.
What is, and again, for anybody that can answer this, what are the benefits of stucco over metal? Prefab metal? I don't know that I know.
So again, there's a good conversation to be had about the purpose and intent of that building material ordinance. You all are, as planning commission, are tasked with administering the ordinance, not writing. Right? So this gets back to kind of a roles and responsibilities thing. You aren't elected, so it's up to your elected officials to adopt rules and policies for the community. Your zoning ordinance is one of those. So as a planning commission, if you feel like, you know, this building materials ordinance is a little outdated and things are changing, we need to provide some options, you can make that recommendation to the city commission and they can take action on it or not. That's kind of the process that's in front of you, that's how that functions. I don't disagree with you all that maybe it's problematic. I also hear what Mike's saying in that these building material ordinances are tricky, and we have been looking at options over the last month and a half on ways to potentially do something that might be a little more effective, just because this has always been problematic to administer as long as I've been involved with you over the last couple of years. Things have come up, you guys have done a great job of sticking to your ordinance, and many occasions where folks have asked for, you know, changes, and when it's been appropriate, you've granted that flexibility or that, you know, you've approved materials, but you've also held strong to this, because I will say that I think holding your standards matters. You've done it on landscaping repeatedly, right? How many times have you held your standard on landscaping? I don't think anybody has not done a development because you required extra trees. Now, certainly there's more expense maybe tied up in building material, but you can't make decisions based on today's expense because it evolves over time. As a planning commission, you know, you're tasked with sort of a longer term view.
Mr. Chair, there's somebody's approach to the podium, if you'd like to hear from.
Yeah, just a quick question, just procedurally. So what we did in the past is typically you come to the planning commission, you may need variances, and then you go for a variance meeting because the planning commission says, well, this is outside of, you know, the scope of our ordinance. You go in, you get a variance. But in this case, we went to go get the variance and they sent us back here. So, you know, just procedurally, it would seem like you come to the planning commission, you guys might say, hey, we love it, but here's what our ordinance says. We can't grant this because we don't want to set the precedent. Push it to the ZBA, go get a variance, go get a variance on this material because that's a one-time thing. Give them that variance because maybe there's, you know, extenuating circumstances. The piece of land, the topography, the grading issues, you know, all the other things that are associated with this development that may not be associated with another development. So it would seem to me that, you know, that would be the correct way to go. It's like, hey, you know, we follow our ordinance, send it to the, you know, the variance, and you get a variance for this because it makes sense in this application. I mean, we're talking about, you know, an 80, 100,000 square foot building. Maybe this doesn't make sense on a 3,000 square foot gas station or C-store, right? So I just thought that's the way it would go, but we were sent to go get a variance, which, by the way, we've been, you know, playing around with that for 2-3 months now. We go to the variance meeting and then they tell us we got to come back here. So now, while I appreciate it, and I really do, to even consider changing the ordinance, it's just a whole, you know, I mean, that might take 2, 3, 4 months. And then it's, you know, arguing over what the language is and, you know, hire an outside attorney to figure out that language of building materials for us. And, you know, you guys aren't going to be able to react every time a building material changes. I think, you know, the big thing and what we got to look at is, do we want this development or not? And you know, to address, you know, comments about race to a bottom, I don't think that's a fair assessment because, I mean, honestly, you don't know the pricing of this material. I mean, this could be more expensive than some of the other things. So I don't look at this as a race to the bottom. Not when these guys plan on being in business for 50 to 100 years. I mean, I'm sure they want to operate out of a building that's, you know, efficient and everything else and is going to be there for a long time. So that's my comments. And again, I think everybody in the room wants to see this thing happen. It's like, how do we make it happen without, you know, chasing anyone away? And I don't think anyone here wants to chase everybody away.
But my understanding, Jason, is,
Thank
I'm
you.
just trying to remember chronologically here. The applicant actually came back in January and actually went to the ZBA, asked for a variance to what they wanted to utilize, and that was granted.
That's correct.
It was granted by the zoning board of appeals. So they want to change it now because it's more cost effective. So it's not that that the city has not been cooperative in trying to help assist them in this process. So I just want to indicate that the zoning board of appeals already granted the variance back at the beginning of the year. They granted what they requested. It's just they've changed their mind now at this point.
I was just saying, one important point of clarification that I think the applicant's been working on this for a while. We received information about this variance request 48 hours before this. So in the response we gave the applicant when it came in was, gosh, if you could wait to submit this, it would really help because we need to think about this. And they said, no, we need to get it in now because we've got to make decisions about due diligence on the building. So we said, fine. So I understand their frustration about being through multiple meetings, but we have to publish notice and we're stuck with timing. And so what we did communicate at the time the application was submitted, that we would prefer more time to think through this because, again, different administration, different analysis of this request. And really felt like, you know, our ordinance, you can't get a variance for anything. Our ordinance literally says you can get a variance for something that can be expressed in numbers. I don't know this is one of those where I'm not sure this is an issue that can be expressed in numbers. It can be expressed in percentages of building facade, and so maybe. But this is one for us as staff, where we went, I don't know if this is even a variance we can grant. And so that's why we're sort of struggling with this a bit, with the understanding that we want to be sure that we're administering our ordinance as it's written, because that's our job. And recognizing that that's inconvenient and it can be frustrating at times, but that's the world we're in.
To me, it seems like this is an unusual building for us to be evaluating. To me, it's more of an industrial size structure than some of our other ones.
And that's a really good point, right? And the applicant just made it, that, maybe this application doesn't make sense at a 3,000 square foot building versus 8,400. I don't disagree. That is a change to the ordinance. That's not a variance, right? Or it's not an appropriate request for a variance, because I know we're not talking about variances, but that's what they mentioned. I want to be protective of the ZBA. Variance has to be a unique aspect of the property, not a unique thing about their building. And so in that case, we're granting a variance that really should apply to any 80,000 square foot building. That's an ordinance amendment, because that applies to all buildings of that type and circumstance. If you all decide that the building materials ordinance should apply differently to all buildings over a certain size or with a certain characteristic, that's an ordinance amendment. So it should apply equally to everybody. Not be sort of a one-off interpretation, because then we end up being not consistent with how we apply our ordinances.
So there's no way to do a variance with a stipulation that an ordinance adjustment be proposed or planned?
I mean, you all as a planning commission can make any interpretation or decision you so desire, right? I would say that if you grant an exception to your ordinance that clearly flies in the face of the text, and then say we're going to amend it, putting the cart before the horse. It's not something I would advise, and it puts you in an awkward position.
Ms. Bostic, if the applicant were to provide us an alternative that was 49% metal panels, would you be willing to support that?
I would.
Because that's kind of where I'm at. I think we're of the same mind.
Yeah, that's
I
where.
think textually it says dominating accent, and I can't get past that. As
Right.
much as I want the development, as much as this might look like a good thing, it probably needs to change the ordinance. The way it's written, I think they need to go 49-51 for them.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Ball, is there, I know I keep asking this, but is there an alternative to simply denying it at this point? I mean, is it appropriate to table at this point, provide them the opportunity to come back with some other alternative based on discussion here?
Well, the question in front of you is this interpretation regarding the metal panel, right? So, you're making a decision based on a proposed site plan amendment. You can deny that particular request, and they could come back with a site plan amendment to go to 49% instead of 51 that we could approve administratively
Or say, if you
because
did-
it meets the ordinance.
Right, they didn't have to
They
go back
also
here.
can come back with a building that's entirely painted precast because they already got a variance for that. That's non-decorative precast panels because they've already been granted a variance for that. With no specificity on the percentage of the building, it just says the predominant building material can be painted precast. It could be 100%, not that they would do that, but that option exists. So I mean, that's kind of where we sit, right? Is you're making a determination on this one request for a site plan amendment that addresses building materials. If you deny that, they can come up with another amendment to the site plan to address that. We're sort of waiting on the overall site plan amendment that includes the building size. It sounds like the building footprint is also moving. That's news to me tonight. So clarifying what's going on the site as we move forward is important because depending on changes that may come back to you or it may not, as staff, we have sort of certain bounds. We can do things administratively or not. Our hope is to be able to approve any changes administratively because functionally things aren't really changing, but depending on how that shift looks, we may decide it has to come back to the board.
All right, so when we make the motion, if we make a motion to deny, we're just saying it's obviously not allowed to be one of the materials characteristic of Michigan, which is based upon the zoning ordinance we already have. So it just, right, so I think that makes the most sense, because if in fact they really want to do 49% in this material, if they're going to be able to do that, and they don't, again, need to come back to us, they can do that administratively with the planning department.
That's correct. The building can be 51% painted precast concrete and 49% that's.
Right. So I'm going to make a motion to deny the request to consider textured clad wall panels a quality material characteristic of Michigan, because it's a metal panel.
It doesn't meet the standards of the ordinance.
Yes, it doesn't meet the standards of 7-15.01 D2.
Ms. Bostic, would you want to consider a friendly modification
Depends on what that is.
to encourage the applicant to work with the city planner to seek approval through the two methods that he's already proposed in this meeting?
Absolutely.
I second that motion.
Any, we have some motion and a second. Any discussion?
Okay, they're gonna put a 4-foot block wall. What if you put a 6-foot? How would that change the dynamics of the percentage? Would that
Not enough, but yeah, I mean.
8-foot wall, whatever it takes? I mean, is that something that they can do? I mean, it sounds like that's what you want them to do, is go through Jason and figure this out. Is that?
Well, as Mr. Ball indicated, the standard is dominant versus accent, which, at least in my interpretation, is 51-49.
Correct.
And this is just my interpretation, Jason has obviously a different one, but if they were to come back with some other alternative, which is 51, something that's approvable, and 49% of something that is an accent, they don't even need to come back to us. That's approvable under the ordinance, and they can look for Jason.
I would approve going about that angle instead of just flattening it tonight.
Well, I think she modified her
I
motion.
did, I said, yeah, I agree to that.
And again, you guys aren't denying their site plan. You're denying this particular request for an amendment to use that name.
Right.
Their site plan is still approved. They have a variance that's been approved to use the painted concrete. None of that changes. You're only making determination on that name.
It just doesn't
Can
make
I
sense.
get one
No,
clarification?
hold on, you have to be addressed by the chair.
Yeah, we're in great building, so is that a?
You're the chair, you can make that determination if you want to hear from the applicant.
Go. And the person.
It just doesn't make sense when what they're proposing, it doesn't meet the ordinance, but it's more, sounded to me like it was more structurally sound. It's energy saving, which nationally we're all supposed to be looking at. It's a newer thing, so we're being inflexible in not keeping up with what's, because of the ordinance isn't current. And it's tying us to encouraging them to do something that is less sound structurally, as well as energy-wise, and yet it meets aesthetically an appropriate look. I have a lot of trouble with wanting to encourage something for a look that isn't necessarily the most structurally sound structure for a building that should be here for a long time. I have trouble. I can't support encouraging something less than the best. I'm sorry,
Do you,
but it doesn't make sense.
Mr. Chair, could I respond to that briefly?
Yes.
Do you agree that these are steel panels that are being presented?
Yeah,
Do you agree that the ordinance says that steel panels can only be used for accents and not dominate the building exterior?
that's what it says. I don't know that I agree with it. And I don't know that something that was, I don't know the age of this ordinance. of how long standing it's been. But it's tying us to, for lack of a better word, an antiquated description versus something that, to me, sounds structurally more sound as well as aesthetically appealing. I can't,
So it sounds like your argument with the city commission.
yeah,
So you should make a proposal to the city commission that they change the ordinance, but tonight this is the ordinance we got.
And I couldn't agree with you more. That's what I was getting at. It seems we're making decisions based on material that none of us here really truly understand. And so it's semantics, but the rules are the rules. Right? That's why we have these ordinances. So I voiced it because I'm trying to understand the whole process. I agree with you.
Did you want to recognize?
I guess I'll recognize it one last comment.
Thank you. I apologize for, I just wanted to get some clarification on the 5149, just so we're all on the same page. So 49% predominant material, even if you raised up block and stuff like that, you've still got the other glazing and the metal paneling, those other
Glazing and metal
percentages.
paneling counts for you towards your 51%.
Oh, well,
Or
okay,
the windows count towards your 51%.
okay, because there's other metal paneling involved, there's other accent panels and all that. So if you took that pie chart and just got 62 down to 49, then
You have
that's
to
an
get the,
administrative approval?
well, so you have to get the 62
Uh-huh.
plus the other metal paneling.
See, that's what I
Down
mean,
to
you have to get rid of that metal too.
But correct, you also got approved already for precast, non-decorative paneling that can make up 51% as well, or some other portion to get there. I mean,
And this is where you're getting the lesser decorative option. I mean, this is a better decorative, more aesthetically pleasing option. But again, it's the language we're fighting. We're fighting the language, but
well, I guess I would offer too that it's not your job as planning commission to design a project for an applicant, right? And so I think that, it's tough times right now in construction and development because things are changing so quickly. And maybe for large buildings like that, and I appreciate all of those challenges, but as you all said, this is not your area of expertise, nor is it expected. Your area of expertise is probably doing your job and administering the ordinance, addressing these things fairly and equally across the board. It's not your job to be an expert on building materials. If that's something that we want to explore, we will find a local architect, an expert in building materials to come in and talk to us about what we should do. And we can think about options. More than happy to do that. But you have to be careful not to start deviating from what the ordinance says, because it's not your job to make policy, that's the city commission.
So who's the expert on this? City commission?
No, like I said, if we wanted to go into updating this ordinance and doing something better, we'd find some local architects and general contractors like we have here tonight to come in and we could look at what we've got and talk about what would be better and how we can make that be appropriate. I'm all sorts of interested in doing that. Honestly, I could be educated too. But as your consulting planner, the guidance I have to give you is you have to follow what's written.
And let's be very clear, these people are, no offense, they're not neutral. What we're talking about are bringing in neutral people to tell us what building materials might exist, et cetera, et cetera. These people are trying to come in and try to reduce their cost to make the building work. Correct. I get that, and I appreciate the arguments. But, I'm not the expert, the city commission's not the expert, and they're not the experts either, especially not in a neutral manner. So I'm with Jason. I'd be happy to take a second look at it, but for the time being, this is what we got.
so Jason, was the 62 down to 49, or you have to get rid of the other?
I'm not going to design it with you tonight.
No, I'm just trying to get a framework of what would be administratively being able to be, work with.
Administratively, you all can comply with the variance you already got.
Mhm.
You can approve that administratively, or administratively, you can submit something where metal paneling is not the predominant building material, so we can address that. So that can be done by having it be approved tilt-up panels, painted precast, or it can be done by having it be brick or split face block or whatever else. Happy to work with you on that. Like I said, in this case, we got presented a variance very quickly right before the deadline, and we had to move on because we have to publish notice and we have to once the application gets submitted.
Understood, and that was nothing towards you, that was more towards the whole process, which we've been working on for a few years. We have, we were dealing with Caitlin before, so that wasn't meant to be directed towards you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we have a motion and a second, and we are gonna go to a vote now, for the commissioners, any more discussion, sorry.
Can we repeat what is,
So, your motion, yeah,
So, to deny the request to consider the texture clad wall panel a quality material characteristic of Michigan because it doesn't meet the standards of section, I gotta read that down. And to encourage the applicant to work with the city planning consultant to meet the ordinance with suitable alternative materials.
Mr. Ball, are you comfortable with that one?
I am.
that was your motion. Marty?
No,
No, I'm sorry, that was an explanation.
Catherine moved it and Mike Womack supported it with the addition of the encouraging.
Okay. So we are at our vote, so all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? So we have,
So 2 nays, Marty and Ann, so 4-2, motion passes.
so, and then that reverts us back to our, public hearing. I don't know if applicant showed up.
The applicant is not here, but we'll go ahead and move forward with the request anyway. So the request in front of you this evening, yes. Oh, sure.
And thank you, please, we do want you here. Please work with Mr. Ball.
We're just gonna have to take many more months to figure it.
So the special land use request in front of you is for 35 Court Street. On this map, it shows there's 2 parcels. It has actually been combined. Those 2 parcels are 1 parcel now, so you don't see that line there in the middle. But the request is to turn this building into a just multi-family building. Today, there are 3 apartments on the 2nd floor. Initially, this building came in as a request to be turned into a marijuana facility. That hasn't panned out, and so now the building owner is asking just to turn the bottom floor also into 3 more apartments, for a total of 6 on the site. To do marijuana, they rezoned it to industrial, which now means that it requires a special land use to be multifamily, because it's in our mixed-use district, which allows you to do other uses outside of the base zone. This is the view of the building from Howard Street, so looking toward the building from the south. This is a view of the building from the northeast. There's actually an alley there technically between it and starts with C restaurant.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Doesn't start with a C. C sound. So as you all know, we have 5 standards to review and approve a special land use. So in this case, I'll be brief. The change in terms of impact is not substantial, right? There's 3 existing apartments there, so we're going from 3 to 6. And so in terms of being compatible in accordance with the goals and objectives of the city, we're meant to appear master plan. It's a use that's appropriate for that mixed use district. It's consistent with the goals of the plan and providing for additional housing. To promote the intent of the ordinance and the zoning district in which the use is proposed. So in this case, again, we talked about it being an I-1 and the mixed use zoning district and the impact on that. The intent of the mixed use district is to allow for that wide range of uses in a manner in which impacts on adjacent uses are minimized. And so this is one of the concerns I'd like to point out to you as a planning commission. This is a special land use, and so you have an opportunity to sort of have an extra layer of review or approval. Because of the nature of the change in the minor change in the use, there is no requirement that landscaping is addressed or that the parking lot is necessarily brought up to code. But the landscaping on the site, the status of the exterior of the building, and the parking lot are all in need of significant repair. And so the recommendation I give to you is that the use itself, in terms of multifamily, is not an issue. But improvements to the site really are necessary because it is on a heavily trafficked corridor. It's a portion of the site that's seeing a lot of the city that's seeing a lot of reinvestment. And so if we're going to see more multifamily uses here, the property can also be brought up to a higher quality. And as a planning commission, the special land use review is your opportunity to make that requirement be known. So the third standard gets at what I was just mentioning, that the be constructed, operated, and maintained to be compatible with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity and not change the essential character of the area. So today, the building and lot have a negative impact on the character of the area. And so with additional investment, additional multifamily units that generate income, the building and lot have the opportunity to be improved. The current building material is wood, it's permitted. However, the paint on the exterior of the building needs to be redone. It's chipped and faded significantly, as well as the landscaping in the exterior building needs to be replaced and addressed. It's served adequately by public facilities, traffic operations, and roads. The plot plan, I'm sorry, I meant to mention this, for special land uses where the building isn't changing, there's no significant construction happening, we have an opportunity as planning department to waive the requirement for a full site. We did that in this case. As you saw, you got kind of a simple plot plan because they're proposing no changes to the building walls and no changes to the exterior. So in this case, that didn't include any information on utilities like we normally have required on the site plan, although we're confident the site's served with city utilities. But in terms of the infrastructure and services there, the parking lot is really in need of repair. It's heavily damaged and it's essentially gravel in some places. Lastly, that it not involve uses, activities, processes that can create nuisance on adjacent properties. In this case, it's multifamily housing on a site that already has 3 multifamily uses, so nuisance issues are unlikely. So our staff recommendation is to either deny or postpone consideration of this special land use so that we can address some of those other outstanding issues related to the building exterior, improving landscaping, and the parking lot. None of that information was included in the plot plan that was submitted. In essence, it was that they were going to make some updates to the interior of the building. There was a letter that was submitted that said there would be some updates to landscaping. We didn't have any specifics on that. So needing to understand exactly what those updates to landscaping would be, where they would be sure they're consistent with the ordinance. Those are things that we need to know. Typically, these are changes that we could look at administratively, but in this case, they aren't required by the ordinance. So we require things that come into compliance with landscaping if the building is expanded by 25%. In this case, there's no building expansion. So they aren't required to come into compliance with landscaping, but clearly those improvements need to be made. And so that's a discretionary thing that really kind of belongs with you all at Planning Commission, not for us as staff, because when we review things administratively, it either meets the code or it doesn't. We don't have a lot of discretion. So in this case, it would be impossible for me to meet the code for landscaping, but certainly improvements in landscaping and parking lot are appropriate.
My feeling is we don't have enough information to be able to I wish the applicant were here tonight.
This is the kind of the MO from the last business. This is somewhere.
Yeah, and I think we discussed those issues there.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever truly, we've seen representatives, but yeah.
Didn't they have an overview of the parking lot?
They did. Yes, it's in your packet.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
in here. Did I skip past it?
Not the existing, but the
So they showed, and I'm sorry, I thought I had the presentation, and I don't know what happened to it. They did show where they would put parking, but it wasn't clear they were actually planning on restriping anything. It wasn't noted that the parking lot would be restriped.
it seemed like I remember they were on the island in there somewhere.
They just showed that there were going to be 8 parking spaces, I believe, and then some places that would be cut off. It wasn't clear they actually planned to restripe them. So that was the part. We just need to clarify exactly what the plans were for that parking lot and site. And again, the parking lot really should be resurfaced.
I'm having a bit of a giggle at whatever that one splotch is. Looks like somebody was out there spray painting
Correct.
lawn furniture or something, didn't impress, spray paint on. Mr. Ball, what legal basis or authority do we have to require them to repaint this, the parking lot and all that?
So from my perspective, it's your standard seat. That use has to be constructed, operated, and maintained to be compatible with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity.
So when, when they submit something like this, do we notify them that it's gonna be on the agenda for a meeting?
Absolutely.
Have we had any, have we heard from the applicant in any way?
We communicated with the applicant significantly leading up to this. We shared with them our full site plan review checklist and encouraged them to be sure that their application addressed those things. You all received what we got. And so certainly we communicated them that they're on the agenda. They also would have received the paper notice that everyone else received with the special use.
Right, and they even barely missed the the October meeting deadline.
Correct.
So they were even pushed back another month.
Because here's where I'm at. And again, I appreciate the fact that we kind of reduce the requirements for some of these people, because full site plans can be expensive and difficult. He indicates in his letter that he fully intends to clean and update the existing landscaping to better suit growth and use, et cetera, et cetera. But he couldn't be bothered to be here. Anybody who's going to promise that and then can't be bothered to be here to defend their actions doesn't sound like somebody who's going to actually fulfill what they promise.
So that's why we want to be sure that the site plan has that information in writing so we can be sure that it happens. More so, frankly, even commercial uses, we want to be sure that we're giving places for people to live in the city, that they're good quality places for people to be. And so that's, again, part of our recommendation here is that we are going to multifamily housing, which clearly we've heard a lot of requests for and demands. We want to be sure that it's of an appropriate quality.
It's an appropriate use, but yeah, we don't need any more slum housing.
Correct.
And that's kind of what this looks like right now.
Well, this building, when they wanted to do the marijuana thing, they weren't gonna do anything to the exterior of the house. And I know we were pushing them to do that, and they were gonna do something.
Correct.
But this place has looked like a dump in 30 years. I mean, so we don't know why they're not here tonight. They could have a very good reason, but I'm not gonna get on that whole, so I think the exterior needs to be upgraded. The parking lots are wrecked. Everybody can agree to that. And,
It just doesn't feel like the owner of this property is ever all in on any of these projects. Takes multiple times going back to them, and then we don't see them. We see a representative who's ill-informed. So, I mean, I don't even know how to proceed forward.
Yeah, I appreciate all of those comments, and they are legitimate, but they're not something we should be evaluating relative to these. So the history of the owner and interaction with the city is what it is. In this case, we have to be thinking about it relative to these criteria for a special land use. And so certainly, in this case, we granted the flexibility to just do a simple plot plan. There's some additional information that we need that we didn't get. And so we can follow up with the owner and try to get that information if you all would be interested in postponing a decision on this, so we're sure that at least they have an ample opportunity to provide that additional information, or let us know if they do plan to redo the parking lot. If they don't plan to redo the parking lot, they don't plan to refinish the building or replace the landscaping, then you can make that determination on the special land use.
Is this special land use, the application is a $1,000 fee as well?
No.
$550.
$550.
Because at this point, I mean, based upon the lack of information, they failed to meet standard C. So if they were here and they were like, genuinely just didn't get the fact they really should have put some more information together, I feel more sympathetic to say, well, let's do a motion to postpone this another month so you can gather that information. But they didn't even bother to show up to the meeting. It doesn't give you. I think if they didn't provide the information, I mean, they can file they can file another application, but I'd be inclined to make a motion to deny it.
I'm ready.
Okay, you make that motion.
So I guess before you do that, what I would offer is that special land use cannot be resubmitted for you. So unlike a site plan, they cannot resubmit, just so you're
That's all
aware.
the more reason they should have been here.
And we don't know why they're not here. There could be a very good reason. And so I guess my request to you all to consider would be, since they aren't present, would be to postpone a decision on this until we can be sure that maybe there's a very good reason why they're not here. I'd hate to make a decision based on that as something happen with one another or something, we'll try to think of that.
You need a
I
motion
appreciate
to do
your,
that?
correct, you do need a motion to take action, either postpone or.
I'll make the motion that we postpone till next month to give the applicant an opportunity to present themselves.
I'll support that.
We have a motion and support. Any more discussion?
So presenting themselves is great, but Mr. Paul, I mean, based on the discussion, it sounds like we also want to see an updated plan for how they plan to do things.
Correct, and we will work with them to be sure we get answers on whether they do plan to resurface the parking lot stripe, what is the landscaping they propose to install, like we would normally get information on, species and type and how many.
And you would get that in writing.
Correct, and having it as part of the site plan and also addressing building exterior. The one concern I didn't mention that I do have and want to be sure they talk about, it's just, if they are filling that first floor with apartments, there are large windows that face the sidewalk and Court Street there on the first floor. And so if there's good landscaping there or some sort of architectural feature, I guess that's okay. But typically, ground floor apartments aren't located against the sidewalk. And so that's something we just want to be sure they've thought through and addressed.
Is that motion seconded?
Yeah, motion was made and seconded. No discussion. If none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, correspondence, training or development activities reports.
There's quite a lot there.
Development activities report is as presented. Training, we had mentioned last month that we have a training come up in December. You all been at downtown Flint recently. Saginaw Street is not Saginaw Street, it's dirt. And so we're delaying our continuing education series until we know when that street's not going to be dirt anymore. So it should be soon, but we're not sure.
What are you gonna do at Lapeer?
Honestly, we could. It's not bad.
We could do it in Lapeer. That would be, I think it would get a lot more participants from here to be there if it was not Flint.
Yeah, okay.
It's a little bit safer at night.
I'm not talking about safety, it's just about, it's a drive. I mean, it would just be nicer if we could have it in this, in the city here.
Can we do it at Salted Access?
Yeah.
Plus days for 16-ounce girls?
Do they fit? Yeah. We can do it somewhere else. Let me talk to the people in charge.
I thought, yeah. Okay.
All right, next to commissioner comments, Commissioner Johnson?
I think I'm going to refer this to Mike is the open-mindedness of looking at I've heard it, we want to change a lot of things. So I think this is happening tonight about this steel in this building. I think our whole ordinance thing needs to be gone through, and I've been on this committee for about 3 years or better, and there's a lot of stuff that I just raise my eyebrows over. I mean, I think we gotta stick to our guns, but I think there's a lot of things that need to be gone through and upgraded and fine-tuned, and I'm all about reasonable, and I just find that we need to be reasonable about things, and that's subjective. One person's reasonability is not somebody else's, so. But I think the ordinances need to be gone through, and we need upgraded stuff, so. That's it for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Roberts? Commissioner Shane?
Couple things. I know we brought it up before, I think Janelle and you. Last week, I was driving through that same area, and there was the strong odor again.
Oh, yeah, we brought that up.
Court
That was a while ago
Yeah,
on Court
Yeah.
Street.
I
Yeah,
smell it the other
it's
day.
wicked, and this was in the afternoon. I think I was going through that area before 1 in the afternoon, and it was strong. And it took me a minute to remember, and I thought, I need to mention that it's still a problem.
I don't know whose building it is though. I don't know which way the wind was going, but it was right around the old Pier Foundry.
Yeah, I was passing Crave, and it was that, I almost think it's that one, what, east of there?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was the
Yeah,
one big
because
east.
the way the winds were blowing it, that was the one that I suspect of. Secondly, it's like a two-pronged thing. I agree with Marty I would like to see, based on what Jason suggested, I think maybe a combined meeting where we are all, those, the city commission, our commission, maybe even the zoning board, are presented with neutral information on building materials and exteriors and that give us some more current information. And then, now I forgot my second thought. The other part of it was in ordinances, the legalities, or as we're upgrading or revamping the ordinances, how do we incorporate some flexibility or allow for, what's a good word, upgrading or being able to stay with or ahead of the times so that we're forward-looking in how we address the ordinances so that we don't find ourselves being behind the times in how we have to look at these things. So those would be my suggestions.
Thank you.
And I'll end with Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Commissioner Boston?
So I would just add, I think you're saying we don't want to have to come back and do a text amendment for every single material that we see coming up. You want to be able to create language in whatever text amendment we do that does provide a little bit of wiggle room to be able to think about
But I think
certain
not
types of
only,
materials.
yeah, but I think not only for building materials, but in any of the ordinances or in our future strategic marked plans that we do, how we keep from locking ourselves in and not having some ability to be forward-looking. I think we do that in some respects, but there are others where we end up tying ourselves. So that would just be, and maybe there's some knowledge to be gained that would prevent us from doing that.
Yeah, so I would agree, before we entertain any type of idea of doing a text amendment, whatever that's gonna be, I do think we need to hear from the experts, because I think, none of us are experts in that area, and it would be, at least on the building materials, I think it would be really helpful to have, maybe 2 or 3 different types of contractors or industry experts that would give us some idea. Because, we can't even sit here and say that that was the best material out there. We don't know. They're saying it. And I'm trying to Google it as we're talking here. I'm Googling the actual product that they had. And, it's hard to do that and try to listen. But I just think it would be helpful to have, experts here. And that could be clearly, it could be an hour meeting just on that particular issue. But I think it's worthwhile. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're being forward thinking.
Do you agree with the joint?
Yeah, I think, well, because I sit on the zoning board and it's sort of his job. And so, we hear a lot of these same issues at the zoning board level. Obviously we fill a different role, but I do think that it would be helpful if the zoning board and the planning commission, obviously as well as the city commission, we're gonna have to review, the text amendments and decide whether they want to do this. Are present. You're not going to get everybody at the same time, but you can try. Yeah.
What about this? Like tonight, let's just give this, let's postpone it a month. We'll talk to some people. We'll, come back next month. These guys have been getting through a lot of hoops with the county to get the Tour Road figured out. It's been delay after delay for this project for them. Their wits' ends are coming at, and I have a feeling this new paneling is something that's come up in their world that they want to change, because they obviously had something agreed upon early on, and then now they're changing it again. It's fine and dandy. You gotta look for the best quality and the best price, and it's a battle out there.
I don't know if we can get something put together in the next 30 days, but, I mean, it's Thanksgiving and Christmas in the next 2 months, so it's always hard to do that, but, I mean, however quickly we can put something together.
Well, I think the key thing is thinking about what's the problem we want to solve with this, right? And so we can do some work on that and see if we certainly have local contractors and architects and folks that I think would probably be happy to come in and, let you pick your brain a bit, or we could look at doing over lunch or some other time where it works, and maybe it doesn't have to be a full meeting, but just to help kind of think about how that works.
I look at it as problem solving.
Yeah.
I mean, let's solve this, let's figure it out, let's talk to people, put it off a month, and that's what we have built in right now anyway, is the ability to put it off a month before we make a decision. And that, to me, is what gives you that buffer to look into things and hopefully get it right. I mean, that's kind of what we're here for.
Thank you. City Manager Womack. Comments? Or comment? Wish to make one?
Yeah, I mean, so I make no secret of the fact that I'm a pro-business person, but pro-business does not mean that we allow anything to come here. And of course, I'm being facetious when I say a cardboard building, but it's not my first rodeo. I've had some really low quality businesses try to come in and they want to come make money. If you're coming into our community to make money, then you can invest in our community. Cardboard buildings are not what we want here. And I wrote down stone versus plastic stone on my piece of paper because we had a business in Cedar which got approved for a stone facade. And then when they were building their building, I went out to go check on it, and it was plastic stone. And it didn't even look good. It was horrible looking. But what I thought was humorous was on the edge of the building, instead of, I don't even know what they could have done, but they literally just cut down the middle of the stones, and you could see the interior of like these hollow stone plastic. And that was what they thought was going to pass in the city. Sometimes these developers will throw whatever they can at the wall to see what they can get away with, whatever's cheapest. I'm not saying that that's what anybody here today did, but we have to hold our ground if we want to have a nice-looking, durable, aesthetically pleasing, weather-resistant business people. And I'll also just comment that, in my previous community as the zoning administrator, I was much more involved in the type of work that Mr. Ball's doing. And it is frustrating when you have ordinances which are clear. This ordinance is clear that, that either the planning commission doesn't hold up and enforce the rules that they're supposed to, or probably the most frustrating thing is treating the zoning board of appeals like they just are a second bite of the apple. You didn't like what mom said, so you went to dad and said, I want you to overrule mom. It's not the way it works legally. So I think we need to do a better job in this city of following our rules, following our expected roles. And again, we want Williams to be here, but they had the opportunity to come and give us a product we could have approved today, and they didn't. They knew what the rules were. So, it's not us. We're not the problem. Now, can we look at our ordinances and maybe make them a little bit more flexible, a little bit more friendly? Yeah, absolutely. But it's not like we're chasing businesses away either. They had the opportunity to present something that meets the ordinances, and they didn't. That's why.
They actually did in January. I mean, they did. They actually got an alternative building material in January. And and I will tell you, being part of that zoning board, the reason why they changed that material, they very clearly said, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, they said it's because it's cheaper. That's the reason they picked this material. So I think it's wonderful to sit here and say this is a great product, but the reason that they did it is because it was cheaper. So.
And if I can speak as a citizen in a CBA, I get tired of site plans that have been approved, projects, and then they kind of come to the CBA, it's like, city is, you're kind of bullying us, and it's going to cost us. It's like, you knew what it was. You approved it. Only a few months later, they're right back. And I remember Dale saying, we got to stop it. You ask for your variances when you come for site plan. Don't do this shit where you, oh, it's gonna cost us. That's not our problem. I realize things are expensive. If they walk away, they walk away. I mean, it's, you know, and others, oh, you know me, it's like a kind of hometown thing. Oh, come on, but you know, it's take care of me. No, we have standards. You know, just because, you know, I have a beer with you, I'm not gonna cut you slack. You know, and that's what they want. Some of the people in this community are like, come on, man, it's hometown. Okay, well, we don't want the place to burn down either. That's why we have ordinances. You know, that's why we have.
Well, I would just add to that, unfortunately, this is sort of the way that this works, right? Is you know, as a developer, general contractor, whomever, you know, that their benefit, this is where they're at, right? As they're trying to reduce costs, get the building built for as low cost per square foot as they can, because that's going to drive future revenue, and that's the world we're in, right? And so, as a planning commission, as a community, those standards you set directly affect cost of construction. But you know, you want to be sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And so I think that's the question we can try to answer. That's the problem we can try to solve is, are we, you know, affecting that cost of construction of these materials for the right reasons, if we're getting the result we want, or do we just have a standard that maybe is a little arbitrary that needs a different approach? And like I said, not an expert on that, but we certainly have people in the community that are, that we can get those answers.
Sorry. One more thing I forgot, and I started to ask and had to table it. Do I, as an individual, have to make that request, or do I ask the planning commission to make that request of the city commissioners to revisit the ordinance? That's what I was getting ready to ask you, my partner.
It's the planning commission that makes the recommendation for a text amendment, right?
That's a little bit of both. So,
Because I thought the way he addressed me with it, that I had.
yes, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I mean, anybody, anytime, anywhere can go to any board and say, hey, you got to change this, right? But how serious is it going to be? And I'm not saying you're not serious, but, you know, let's say somebody from Timbuktu calls up and sends an email and says, I think you should change your ordinance. Do you think the council's going to care that much?
Well,
But,
and to me, it has an impact on all of us, not just me,
sure,
in making our decisions more difficult or easier.
but
So that's why I wanted clarification on that.
sure, but if I could continue my statement. But this is a deliberative board that has an expert consultant. And if this board makes a recommendation, I don't know what the percentages are, but 90% chance that the commission would change the ordinance at that point. But you can't just willy-nilly change these things. You shouldn't, at least.
Well, I guess to answer your question, and there would be a couple, so there is an application that anybody can fill out to request a change to the zoning ordinance. And maybe have to give us back. Anybody can initiate an amendment to the ordinance, right? But that amendment request comes to you all as a planning commission, you make a recommendation on it with the city commission. The other way for amendment to be initiated is you as a planning commission say, we're going to initiate an amendment to the ordinance. And then that kicks off that process, and that's somebody makes a motion to say, we're gonna initiate a change to the ordinance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess what I would offer is we know we wanna, we hear you. So we'll work on some ways to get clarity and get some answers around what might be some better opportunities, ways to address this building material thing. If we find out what we've got to do. But get some clarity around that, and then with that understanding, you as the planning commission can decide whether it's a good time, or use the planning commission to initiate that amendment. Because, hey, we heard from these architects and this general contractor, and I really think we should move in this direction on this, and so then we can initiate that amendment. And that gives us as staff some better direction on where to go.
Okay.
So just initiate an amendment to this, it's like, well, we'll work on some stuff, but if we have clear direction, then we're sure to give you that what you want.
So step one is information gathering.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
All right, you guys ready for my comments? They're gonna be long.
Uh-oh.
I gotta go.
I did want to say he was not present today, but I wanted to thank Jeff Pattison for his service to the city for the last 4 years as a city commissioner and a part of our panel. And so I just wanted to go on record that thank you, Jeff. hopefully I'll see him around. I don't really see him so much in that community.
Is he not on the planning commission?
He lost his
He lost his
position.
seat, so he was a city commission, actually, he was on because he was a city
Okay.
commissioner.
So, and we will be looking forward to another appointed or planning commissioner here probably within a month or soon.
Yeah, it should be before the December meeting.
And so we'll have
Two city commission meetings in between them.
we will have a new member to our board. And other than that, I have nothing. And I hear a motion of adjournment, and I second that, and I'm pretty sure we all vote yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr.
Hopefully I didn't mess that up, sorry. I'm gonna address you by Mr. Ball. You got me every single, I called you Jason, he called you Mr. I'm like, man, you got me.
Oh, no, Jason's fine. Mr. Ball is my like great grandpa.
We'll have to, yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah, my Thursday's next up, it showed up here last Thursday.
I drove all the way down, I drove all the way down
from
from
the war, I'm like.
Tuesday night, I drove all the way downtown Detroit for a show that was night Tuesday.
Yeah, I called you because I'm like, did the meeting get?
I went all the way down
Because
to
I
Mexican
wasn't
town.
here last.
And it's next Tuesday, which is fine, because I hang out there a lot, so I was like, oh, cool, I was going out the bar and everything, but I drove, I'm like, oh my, I'm like, where are you guys at? And they're like, yeah, this next Tuesday. I'm like, no, it's not, it's
I
right now.
felt like such
Yeah.
an idiot, so I called my wife and I said, text Janelle, because I don't